Okay, next malacha we're going to do is a malacha that's called kosher. Kosher means tying, and the opposite end of it is matir, untying. But you're not allowed to tie, you're not allowed to untie. And so the two malachas are interconnected. Now where do we find tying that they used to make knots? Basically means making knots. Where do we find that the Mishkan did make knots? So there's a few reasons brought down. The Alter Rebbe brings down the reason is because when they used to have to catch the chalazin fish for the tchelis, so they had to make nets, fishing nets to catch the fish.
In the desert?
No, they did it was in the Mediterranean. They didn't have the tchelis in the midbar, seemingly, unless it was a miracle. But the Rambam writes that the chalazin fish was actually found in the Mediterranean. Calls it Yam HaMelech sometimes, but he basically means the Mediterranean. So in order to catch it, okay, in the Mishkan later on, after the Jews were out of the desert, they used to have to tie knots to make nets. Another reason it says they used to make knots to make the curtains for the Mishkan, or for the garments of the Kohanim, they would have to make knots anyway. So basically, anytime you tie a knot, there's an issue with it on Shabbos. Now there's three classifications of knots. One knot is biblically forbidden, one knot is rabbinically forbidden, and one type of knot is permissible. Okay? Now what's the definition of a knot which is forbidden biblically? So in halacha, like everything else, there are different opinions. Everybody says that it has to be a permanent knot. It's called kasher shel kayom. It has to be a permanent knot. A knot that you make to undo the same day is not a knot. Okay. Other opinions say, by the way, and it's brought down in halacha, that a knot that you will untie in 7 days. Because I'll give you an example. What's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, that the Talmidei Chachamim, they used to sleep in their clothes because they were busy learning day and night. So they would sleep in their clothes. So when they tied their shoes, they didn't take them off at night. So then when they tied the shoes, it would be a knot lasting more than a day. So now the question is, on Shabbos, would they be allowed to untie that knot? Now if it's a permanent knot, and like we learned, whenever you're not allowed to make a knot, you're not allowed to untie the knot. So the question is that the definition of a permanent knot? So some opinions, it says you have to be machmir, basically, that one day, if it's taken out in more than a day, it's called a permanent knot. Other people say 7 days. That's according to all opinions, that's a biblical knot. Now other opinions say, in addition to that, in order to be a biblical knot, which is forbidden biblically to tie on Shabbos, it has to be what's called Maisa Uman. It has to be a professional knot. What is the definition of a professional knot? It's not clear in halacha. But I'll give you an example. Sailors, when they would tie the boats, they would tie a professional knot on the anchors or whatever when they would tie the boat. Or when they would have camels, so they would need a leash on the camel. So they would stick the rope into the camel's ear and nose, and then they would tie it in a permanent knot. But it was a professional type of a knot. It wasn't time you make a knot like we make knots. But the Alter Rebbe also brings down that we don't know exactly what a permanent knot is. One second. So let's go again. According to certain opinions, in order to be a biblical knot, it has to be permanent. And again, permanent means more than a day or 7 days. And it has to be a professional knot. Some opinions say a permanent knot itself is biblical. Some opinions say no. You need two criteria to make it biblical. Permanent and professional knot. But regardless, even if you have one without the next, it's still rabbinically forbidden. The Alter Rebbe says that because we're not certain what a professional knot is, it's possible that a double knot is called a professional knot. In other words, he says like this. If you have, when you tie your shoes, most people, you make a knot, one knot, and then you make a bow over it. Okay? That's normally the way you tie your shoes. That, according to all opinions, is allowed on Shabbos. That is not a permanent knot. Number one, you plan to take off your shoes that day. And secondly, it's not a professional knot because you just pull the string and the knot comes apart. So therefore, but the different categories. Okay, so some poskim say that you must have two conditions, permanent and professional. Another opinion says even if one of them is enough, it's still biblical. Now, what's the halacha? So the halacha is as follows. Any permanent knot, whether professional or not, is forbidden. Either rabbinically or biblical. But bottom line is, as far as we're concerned, it's still forbidden. Okay? Secondly, any professional knot, whether permanent or not permanent, is again either biblically or rabbinically forbidden. Now, any knot that's made to stay longer than 24 hours is not biblically forbidden if it's not permanent, or it's not professional, so then it's rabbinically forbidden. Okay? Now, what's the definition of professional knots? Okay? So the Gemara, when the Gemara talks about this in Shabbos, we told you the knots they would make on the boats, the knots they would make on a camel, they were professionally done. You can tell, even today, you can tell people make certain knots that are mamish professionally done. Okay, so Leperal, any double knot that's tight is considered a permanent knot. And therefore, let me tell you some just practical dinim involved. What happens if somebody ties a shoe and they make a bow and then they make a second bow on top of it that it shouldn't fall apart, shouldn't open up. Many times your bow opens up, especially by kids. By kids, they run around, it opens up. So what they do is, how will they tie the shoe? They'll make a single knot, they'll make a bow, and then they'll make another bow on top of that. That is a double knot, which according to all opinions is forbidden. Biblically, rabbinically, it's not relevant. As far as we're concerned, it doesn't matter. It's still forbidden to make a double knot in your shoes. Because usually when it's done like that, the reason why you're doing it is that you don't have to take it apart every time you tie and untie your shoe. It stays that way, you put your feet into the shoe because you're lazy to do anything about it. Okay, now, what happens if a person ties, let's say, a shoe with a single bow, and his intention is to leave it there for longer than a day? It doesn't matter what his personal intention is. You go by the majority of people, when they tie their shoes, is basically the purpose of it to undo it within a day. Now, one second, I'll tell you another interesting thing. On your tzitzis or on your talis, so before you put on the talis, you check the tzitzis. Shabbos you can't separate the tzitzis. By the way, it's another malacha. But sometimes that the outer knot loosens up a little bit. The top of the knots. So normally you just pull it tight. But on Shabbos you're not allowed to do that. No. Why? Because now you're making a double knot. There's one knot. Tightening the second knot.
That's all, but you're not making a new knot.
It doesn't matter. Tightening a knot is making a knot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll prove it to you. You put on tefillin, yeah. Baruch Hashem. Now, when you tie the tefillin, what do? You pull it down.
Yes.
What are you doing by that? What are you doing by pulling it down?
Tightening.
You're tightening it.
Yeah.
The Torah says, kshira. Okay, now, you're making it by pulling it down.
Yes.
That's making a knot. So you wouldn't be allowed to, anyway you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos.
That's not a knot.
But it is a knot. You're tightening the knot. It is a tightening of the knot. It might not be biblically forbidden, but it's definitely rabbinically forbidden. But I'm saying if you have tzitzis, kids or adults that are married wearing a talus, right? Or Sephardim that wear a talus. So you have to be careful on Shabbos. You can, let's say the knot loosened this much, the second knot. So you can tighten it up to the actual knot. Because you're not making a double knot. But when you tighten it on the knot, then you make it, and your intent is not that it should come out in a day, your intent is it should last as long as possible. What?
Suzanne, does that apply even if it completely unravels the knot? Then you have to leave.
You can't make a knot.
Not remaking the knot, you're doing what you just said. You're just making it very close. They're completely unraveled. Meaning the first.
I understand, but if you don't make it tight,
then it's fine.
Then it's fine. Because you're not making a knot.
Okay. And the second one is, we say with regards to the belt on a belt loop, you want to leave it there for weeks on end. You're not allowed to do that because it's not batish.
Which case do you mean?
You have a belt and you put it in the loops, and you plan on leaving it in the loops for when it goes up. So you said you're not allowed to do that because it's like makar batish.
Yeah, because you're finishing a keli. That's more or less permanent.
So now, what about with regards to tying the shoe? If you plan on leaving it tied, why?
So it says in halacha, that's what he's saying. It's not determined by the intent of the person tying the knot, but rather by the practice of most people. That's what it says in halacha. Which means most people, when they tie their shoes, the intent is to take it off that day.
Yes.
The intent of a normal person when they tie their shoes is to untie it. Huh? No, not if it's a double knot. That's what I'm saying. A double knot you can't make. But therefore, a double knot you can't take apart either on Shabbos. That means, I'll tell you something. It's chatoy ani maskirayim. Okay, I have different pairs of shoes. Not 300, but I have shoes with ties, and I have loafer shoes that, okay. Now I'm very lazy. So I don't like tying my shoes every day. So I always make a double bow, double knot, and it lasts for weeks. And I just stick my foot in and out.
What about the time?
1 second. 1 second. So over there, I'm not allowed to do that in Shabbos. In other words, if my shoe unravels, sometimes even the double knot opens up, right? So if that double knot opens up on Shabbos, I wouldn't be allowed to make such a knot again. I would have to make a single bow, because that's a permanent knot. And my intent is, b'chal, that it should stay there longer. That's why people make double knots.
And a belt wouldn't be under that.
Huh?
And a belt.
A belt is not where do you have a knot on a belt?
No, in terms of makar pati. I'm not talking about tying. I'm talking about in terms of finishing.
No, the garment's done already.
You said that if you put on a loops and you plan on leaving it,
Put on loops.
you put the belt through the loops of the pants and you
No.
plan on leaving it there forever.
If that's only if the pants can't be worn without the belt.
If the okay, and the shoes you can't wear shoes. You have shoelaces in order to keep the shoes properly fitted on your foot.
Yeah, but the shoes already new shoelaces you couldn't put in on Shabbos. That's makar b'patish. But the shoelaces that are in there already, it's not the first time you're tying the shoe.
Right, but when you tie it and you plan on leaving it forever, that's like finishing the shoe. No?
No, the shoe is done. There's no difference in the shoe whether you make a knot in a bow or a double knot or triple knot. The shoe is the same shoe. You're not changing the shoe in any way whatsoever.
You can't. Could you use it beforehand? Meaning, could it be used as a shoe beforehand?
Yes. Yes.
Saying that.
Yeah, it's not about. What?
There are the ties that are like Windsor tie, double knot.
Yeah, but I mean, we just started this. Many opinions hold, and we'll see what the different opinions. Any knot that you could take out with one hand is not called a permanent knot. Like, for instance, anybody could take out a tie with, just with one hand. You could take off the tie. And now that a tie is not made to last for a week. Now, some people, by the way, again, lazy people, they make a knot in the tie, or I tell you something else, they don't know how to make ties. So they have somebody make a tie for them. You know how many guys I made by the weddings? I made the ties afterwards because in the yichud room, because they didn't know how to make a tie. Some people don't. Either they never wear a tie or they just whatever. So some people make a knot in the tie and then they leave it there. They just loosen it and take it off that way, and over the collar, under the collar. That would be a shayla on Shabbos, because to make such a knot, To make such a knot would be a shad, because in your mind, it's a kesher shokayama. And now that's what you're doing. You're actually making a permanent knot.
So what if you don't make it, but you use that?
Yeah, to tighten it, that you're not making a knot, you're just tightening and loosening it. That's not a problem. Okay.